they will try to actually fix it, and but maybe we can, I don't know, either we can wait for another 5 minutes, or we can start with the panelists here in the room, and then reverse the order, because my initial idea is actually to invite speakers from outside to give us a global perspective on women, peace, and security from the Middle East, from Ukraine, from a much broader, different continent that Nicola could also offer. But we are currently experiencing some troubles to hear them. So maybe we can a little bit adjust and start discussing with them if they agree. I will just check whether we can hear them later after we start with the speakers here, not to further wait. So just give me a second. Sorry.
And put the phone on speaker next to the mic, because we can see him.
Yeah, I don't have all of the headphones.
You want me to connect on you?
No.
Please tell someone just to try speaking, and one of them, so I can just check the sound now, please.
Hello, can you hear us?
Ja mogu da se čujem ovde na laptopu.
Hello? Hello, hello.
Hello.
Someone.
Hello.
Ja, sad možemo da ih čujemo.
Hello? Yes? Hello, can you hear us? We cannot hear you right now. Now we can.
Yep, you can hear us now?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you all for this patience. Now we can start officially and then stick to the original agenda. Thank you very much for joining us for the third day of the conference, and for me personally, very dear and important topics such as feminist peace in hostile times. This panel is special in many ways, not only that the topic we will discuss is quite important. I have today with me 7 very wonderful women speakers that will join us online, but also offline here with us. It will be challenging for me to moderate like 7 speakers, which is unusual to have at this type of conferences. But before I go with the introduction to the topic and the speakers, each, I would also like to express gratitude for two women who were behind the scenes standing and helping me to make this panel work. One is Zoran Antonijević, who is not here with us, but she's our dear friend and colleague and a famous feminist in Serbia, but also on the other note, Zorica is here. And she helped me a lot with finding a right person to talk to on these important issues. And without two of them, I really could not keep up with other of my work. So tremendously grateful for women behind the scenes who are usually helping voluntarily in these situations. The topic itself is very much timely. 2 days ago, we have seen that UN Security Council resolution, UN Security Council adopted new resolution on Gaza that is hailed as peace plan. The other said it's a new colonial plan to take over Gaza that will only bring and deepen injustice towards Palestinians. When we speak about women, peace, security, we also forget it's a UN Security Council resolution that is mandatory to all the countries. Sometimes that those powerful want to sideline this very important resolution. And this year we marked 25 years since its adoption. And when feminists try to push peace activists try to push this agenda through this body, they actually wanted to not only increase participation of women in decision making, but they just also wanted to bring justice and prevent new peace. However, we are like witnessing that genocide in Gaza, that wars in Africa, but onslaught on Ukraine is profoundly changing our societies and state. And in this much global, very complex security environment, we are trying to rethink and re-evaluate women, peace, and security agenda, and to provoke discussion about how we can re-examine agenda in the light of new global security realities, in new forms of conflict, authoritarian resurgence, and global insecurity. But also we want to discuss and explore how anti-gender movements, authoritarian regimes, and different forms of violence are transforming feminist activism and peace-building strategies. We have also wonderful feminists from the Western Balkans and the region, and we want to actually connect the experiences from the region with the global feminist strategies, and to actually share our thoughts and experience and inform this global broader discussion. And finally, if we could generate any kind of new recommendation of how to approach not only this grassroots national, regional and global frameworks, but how to actually redefine the agenda in the current context. What we designed as like initial leading question is that in this new world shaped by new wars, geopolitical rivalries, and overlapping crises, we want to provide the answer to the question what women, peace, and security agenda means today, and whose security does it truly serves, and how these anti-gender movements and authoritarian regimes is actually reshaping space for feminist activism and peace building. And how can feminist visions of security, deeply rooted in justice, care, and solidarity, be translated into concrete policy and advocacy actions at local, national, regional, global levels, and what lessons we learned from the Western Balkans struggle, and what these lessons can inspire a transnational feminist movement. The flow of discussion will go in a way that I will ask first Shirine, Olena, and Nicola to present us much more global perspective, or their regional perspective on these leading questions, and then we will feed into the regional discussions and how all of these questions are reflected in our region and what feminists face today in the Western Balkans. And from my right side, two wonderful feminists from Kosovo and Serbia that will share and intervene on youth, peace and security, and how young women peace leaders are actually connecting, working together, and what they want to share. But first of all, you can see, I cannot see here, but sorry for this turnaround. I want to present Shirine Jurdi from WILPF Lebanon, Olena Kharytonova, if I say it correctly. She's gender advisor from the Ministry of Education and Science in Ukraine, and Nicola Popović, a director and co-founder of Gender Association. I would like to give first a word to Nicola to share with us much more global perspectives on women, peace and security today. And since you worked in several regions and continents, what do you think of women's security today, and to shed more light on anti-gender movements, but especially your organization is based in Germany. If you also reflect on feminist foreign policy that certain countries promote globally as a tool and mean to actually to improve women participation, women's justice, and women's security. Nicola?
Thank you so much. It is a great honor to be with you today. Unfortunately, not in person, but certainly with you in spirit. So if we go back, like today or this year, we commemorate 25 years of Resolution 1325 and the Women, Peace and Security agenda. So if we think about its roots, as you rightly said, it came from a feminist, pacifist movement from civil society organizations and women advocates in the aftermath of the conflict in Bosnia-Herzegovina and Rwanda, but also following Women, Peace and Security conferences, global Women, Peace and Security conferences. And we look today at not only one, but over 10 resolutions on women, peace and security that are not in a vacuum. They're embedded in human rights frameworks such as CEDAW, such as the Istanbul Convention, such as international humanitarian law with the Geneva conventions, as well as international criminal law, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, the International Criminal Tribunals, and as well as concepts such as human security and not only state security. These are all concepts and legal mechanisms that we can fall back on for more than 2 decades. The implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda has 4 pillars: prevention, participation, protection, the relief and recovery, and the inclusion of women in all of these pillars. Especially when it comes to participation of women, a lot of the national action plans through which this resolution is implemented through our governments, we do have a military component in most cases, a security component in which women are included. So I will go back to that because the women's movement that led towards these resolutions had a strong pacifist component, yet the implementation of these resolutions also happens not only in the Ministries of Foreign Affairs or Internal Affairs, but also through the Ministries of Defense. And especially if we look also at regional action plans, such as from the monitoring framework of the African Union, the European Union, ASEAN region, or NATO, there are military components to this women, peace and security agenda. Yet the prevention pillar, even in the last years, has been less prominent. Participation pillar within the security area has been quite well funded. Similar to the women, peace and security agenda, though, feminist foreign policy is also an inherently pacifist approach to foreign policy, for example, in opposition to militarization and understanding and recognizing that militarization fosters a cycle of violence and abuse. And yet, also here, since, for example, CSW in 2022, and maybe my Ukrainian colleagues will either contradict or reinforce that point, women from Ukraine have called for the support through arms, for example, or arms trade, and connecting feminist approaches to self-determination and self-defense. But the question is always how does that look like in cases, and you mentioned Gaza, in cases of arms trade to a more dominant and powerful actor? What is that? Can that still be part of a feminist foreign policy? And as you said, and you asked, our company is based in Germany. We work globally, only on women, peace and security issues, but you ask about Germany in particular. So Germany has a dark history that has a contemporary political component to all its foreign policy. And in result of that dark history, Germany had a strong feminist and a strong peace movement that led, for example, then finally in 2016 to its first national action plan, and during its third iteration to a feminist foreign policy and a feminist development cooperation policy that, by the way, was much more feminist in that sense, being critical, post-colonial, non-binary, and had an intersectional approach to feminism. And unlike Germany's feminist foreign policy, still prevails even under the change of government. And in 2019, after the action plan and the second iteration, we conducted a perception study, how Germany is perceived as a women, peace and security actor. A perception study that then led to or contributed to reflection on how a feminist foreign policy could look like, or how Germany could represent women, peace and security aspects as a non-permanent member in the Security Council in 2019, when it brought in Women, Peace, Security Resolution 2467. And we looked at 4 case studies: Afghanistan, where Germany had a role to play in the intra-Afghan peace process; Colombia, where Germany had significant funding support to women, peace and security through the GIZ; in Mali, where Germany had military presence in the peacekeeping mission at the time; and Ukraine, in which Germany supported a lot of the OSCE initiatives. And based on our study, we found that Germany was perceived, and we had the study conducted in the countries by nationals from that country. So it was not me as a German asking actors, like, what do you think about my home country? It was like, Ukrainian researchers in Ukraine, Afghan researchers in Afghanistan. Of course, the situation has since radically changed. But at that time, we found that Germany was perceived as a strong gender ally, but not a women, peace and security leader. And so that changed a bit when the feminist foreign policy was introduced. Germany got a lot more prominent on that in that arena. But through the arms trade to Ukraine, which is one case that I mentioned, and to Israel, it became very, very controversial of how feminist is that if you play, and if under Annalena Baerbock, Green Party member, if you provide weapons in situations like that may be very perceived differently also from a feminist side, but how feminist can that really be? Now, concluding, in the past months, only months, we have so radical shifts. We have, since the inception of 1325, the most organized and well-funded backlash against gender equality and against women, peace, and security aspects that we have seen in the last 25 years. There are budget shifts from development cooperation initiatives, peace building of grassroots women organizations to militarization. We try to defend a language that we agreed on 30 or 25 years ago. And there are even full development agencies closing altogether and finishing their programs. So governments, regional organization, and international organization in a very, very short time have made incredible compromises. Like they have compromised especially aspects like sexual and reproductive health, military, like peace building, and shifts towards more militarization. So now, 25 years later, after 1325, the agenda is really at a crossroad. Will it be co-opted or will it be reclaimed? So if we're serious about peace and gender equality, we have to be serious about the structures and dynamics that prevail and foster violent dynamics and how we go about it. And if we're serious, we really need to reinvest and reclaim women, peace, and security as it was initially intended. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola, for laying out many challenges ahead, but also opportunities to rethink currently and join forces. Shirine, what we are witnessing actually now is a form of reshaping Middle East. Can you tell us more what means like women, peace, and security today for women in Lebanon, but also in your region? And how do you see the challenges brought up by Nicola as well? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thanks to Zaritza, to you, Maya, and thank you, Nicola, for paving the way for this discussion. Definitely, we're meeting, as Nicola said, in a moment where women, peace, and security agenda faces one of its most profound crises of credibility. So credibility is at risk. In Gaza, over than 70% of those killed were women and children. Whole hospitals, maternity wards, and shelters were deliberately targeted. In Lebanon, more than 40 villages in the south of Lebanon were completely destroyed, and tens of thousands were displaced, the majority women, children, and caregivers. Many women are asking, just as we in the room, who protects us? Who counts as human in the calculus of global security? At the 2024 and 2025 UN Women, Peace and Security Open Debates, states reaffirmed their commitments, but women on the ground saw a gap between words and reality. That gap we must confront. I will divide my remarks into mainly 4 parts so that we can think about it, maybe the discussions. The gaps that were exposed in Gaza, Lebanon, and in different parts also in MENA, like in Yemen, in Iraq, in Libya, like the whole region, in Syria. The wars in Gaza and in the south of Lebanon have revealed structural weaknesses in the global protection architecture. Despite high-level commitments, women and civilians faced systematic attacks on civilian infrastructure, unrestricted humanitarian access, rising displacement, widespread psychological trauma, and eroding trust in international mechanisms, including feminist foreign policy. For these crises underscored 3 urgent lessons. First, civilian protection cannot be selective. It must apply equally to all contexts, regardless of geopolitical alignment. Human security indicators must guide policy, not only military stability or ceasefire lines. Accountability mechanisms must function consistently on the legitimacy of international norms weakness. This is not only for Middle East, it is a stress test for the entire global rule-based order. Second, the shrinking civic spaces, as you mentioned. This is also like one of the things that we are facing, depending on the counter-terror narratives, anti-gender movements. All of these are like shrinking everything that we can do, human rights defenders, and peace builders, we face surveillance, we face intimidation, we face defunding and digital attacks. Yet, we have, as feminist organizations, we are re-strategizing our efforts. We are building digital solidarity networks. We are coordinating cross-border advocacy. And this is, I think, this can be like maybe one of the steps that we can push forward towards this cross-border advocacy. We're documenting the violations for international accountability. We're expanding early warning and community mediation roles. And we're convening at the regional level like we did in October under the title, How We Decolonize the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. So these institutions that uphold democracy in Europe, human rights and the rule of law, that protect the civil spaces, unfortunately, are not found in our region. Third point, from militarization of military security to feminist human security. And this is where the policy of shift that we want to do. Women across MENA are telling you clearly, militarization definitions of security have failed them. What we demand, what aligns with Europe and the OSCE prevention mandates, what we demand is a feminist human security based on dignity, dignity that is lost for women in Gaza, in Yemen, in Libya, and Lebanon. We are asking for access to services, not only to humanitarian support. It's not that we want wheat, it's not that we want bread, but we want humanitarian to be linked also with development. Unfortunately, most of the funding is going to humanitarian, and humanitarian is caused by the military, and the military is caused by the armament, and the armament is also caused by the violations of and the lack of the implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty. So what we have, like the protection of civilians, accountability, and inclusive governance. So all of this can be in concrete policy through protection, like how we prioritize access. Definitely, we need the safety of people and the livelihoods, but we still still need to link it to development. We need the participation of women from the design towards the process, from the ceasefire processes to monitoring mechanisms to humanitarian corridor to local governance. What we need is justice to supporting international human rights, humanitarian law, independent investigations. We need funding, and we need flexible funding, and we need cross-regional lessons that we can do together so that we can restore what we have lacked in the trust of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Last, I want to share one thing that was also raised somehow with Nicola. Unfortunately, in the meetings of the CSP, when we talk about the Arms Trade Treaty, we are accused of being politicizing the Arms Trade Treaty agenda. But actually, we're just talking about the lack of implementation, about the need to implement Article 7.4, about Article 6, about not sending weapons to conflict areas that might cause genocide or that can cause violence against women. Regarding the feminist foreign policy, how much feminist foreign policy is actually linking it to the women, peace and security in other regions? How about how do we define sending weapons that is actually terrorizing and committing crimes against women? And I think this is an issue that we need to raise in terms of accountability, in terms of complicity, and this is what we are not doing. And this is something that we need to raise in terms of safety and in terms of security. We need to work on how we can raise this feminist foreign policy to act in terms of solidarity when women in conflict, not only in MENA, in different parts of the world, when women in conflict areas are raising their voices, how can this feminist foreign policy act in solidarity with these women and not in complicity with actually the value system of killing instead of the value system of bringing dignity to people? Last thing I want to raise, we need to raise the issue of safety in terms of the resources that are being spent on destruction, on the development of weapons, on the artificial intelligence, on the killer robots that are being produced, like the Lavender program and other programs. These are all issues that we need to raise, and we need to act collectively, just like those in the room. And we need also to raise the concerns of these double standards. This is what makes the women, peace, and security at risk. And this is what we need to bring back the women, peace, and security as a transformative, not normative agenda that works for us, women in conflict. Thank you so much for having me and for.
Thank you
that
very much,
so
Shirine.
time.
It was the most important to hear. I think that there are so many challenges that are overwhelming, but also you stressed the very, very good what needs to be done, and I have a feeling that there is sense of urgency not to postpone this issue further along. I will ask Olena now to join us and to actually tell us, because the conflict in Ukraine profoundly changes the society in the Ukraine, but also profoundly affected Europe and other regions. Can you tell us more how how the situation actually affected Ukrainian women and men, how it influenced the thinking of women, peace, security, and what needs to be done?
Thank you, dear Maya, dear colleagues, for the invitation and for organizing this very important event. I would like to say that Ukraine became the first country in the world to adopt a national action plan for the implementation of Resolution 1325 during an active armed conflict. The war started by Russia in 2014. So the first plan was adopted in 2016, the second in 2020. And this second national plan, which remains in effect until the end of this year, set several key goals. And one of the most important was to ensure access to justice and to provide comprehensive support for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. And thanks to strong advocacy from feminist human rights organizations and survivors, Ukraine adopted a law with guarantees of legal and social protection for those affected by conflict-related sexual violence and launched a pilot program to provide interim reparations. And now the third plan is undergoing public consultations, and regional coalitions 1325 in all the regions of Ukraine are deeply involved in this process. And they apply the principle or the strategy of localization, meaning that the plan is grounded in the real needs of communities now and in the context of recovery. And the new draft plan places strong emphasis on ensuring women's participation in negotiation processes and peace-building initiatives. Really, the Women, Peace and Security agenda reminds us that when women take part equally in diplomacy, peace processes gain more diverse perspectives. Women bring essential human rights and social justice issues to the table. And this helps us create a more stable and just peace. And interestingly, that there are two concepts of peace: sustaining peace and just peace. And in United Nations terms, sustaining peace is a long-term effort to tackle the root causes of conflict. It means strengthening the institutions, rebuilding the economy, supporting the rule of law, promoting non-violence, and ensuring equality. So the goal is to prevent new conflicts and rebuild trust in society. And when we are talking about just peace is not officially defined by the UN, but in political and academic debates, it usually means a peace built on restoring rights, ensuring access to justice, and holding perpetrators of international crimes accountable, and providing reparations to victims. So a just peace is seen as legitimate because it includes victims' perspectives and ends impunity. And at the same time, I think that just peace and sustaining peace should be understood as complementary, not interchangeable. And today, as my colleagues mentioned, we see international narratives emerging that do not correspond to the Ukrainian context, on my view, narratives of appeasement, forgiveness, or disarmament. And within some feminist anti-military circles, there are arguments that armament reinforces militarism, masculinity, and diverts resources from social care, from medical programs, for example. But what I would like to stress that Ukraine has introduced an essential distinction: weapons for aggression versus weapons for defense. So weapons for aggression are unacceptable. But when a society must defend itself from aggression, armament becomes necessary to protect our values, our shared values: human dignity, freedom, equality, and human life. Today was a terrible attack. Tonight in Chernobyl is one of the regional centers in Western Ukraine. And at the moment we have the information that 20 people were killed this night and 66 wounded. And I think that this number will rise. Another important challenge is the emergence of new dividing lines within Ukrainian society between those who stayed and those who had to leave country, between military personnel and civilians, between those who lost homes or loved ones and those who did not suffer such losses, between survivors of war crimes and those without such experiences. So this difference can create tensions that hinder unity and hinder the solidarity in the society. And many of these challenges can be addressed, of course, through the core principles of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda: participation, relief and recovery, prevention and protection. But in Ukraine, women are still underrepresented in decision-making at all levels. Now, over 70,000 women serve in the armed forces of Ukraine, and more than 5,000 are on the front line. And yet only 11% of military leadership positions are held by women. And in peace negotiations, women have been completely absent from official delegations in talk with the Russian Federation. So women are also not visible enough in public communication, especially in the security sector and among those resisting in occupied areas. And the typical image of female heroine, is still very masculine. And the diversity of women's real experiences in war is rarely shown. And a really important part of the work we do here is linked to the education system. In 2022, Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine adopted a gender equality strategy for education. And one of its key goals is to raise awareness about the role women play in conflict resolution and post-conflict recovery. And on my view, one also very important thing I would like to stress here, that the state should also develop ways to involve Ukrainians living abroad in peace building. Women and children make up more than 80% of Ukrainians displaced abroad, and these experiences must be included when shaping policies on recovery and return. And finally, it is critically important to establish clear red lines for any future peace agreements, such as no impunity for war crimes, including conflict-related sexual violence, and no acceptance of territorial concessions. And these red lines must be communicated very clearly at both the domestic and international levels. And equally essential is ensuring guarantees of non-recurrence and a comprehensive victim-oriented system of protection that safeguards people from the future aggression. Thank you, dear colleagues, and I think that a little bit later we could have a discussion.
Thank you very much.
Little bit broader.
Thank you very much, Olena. We hear you. I think we can relate to you because women in the Balkans called for just peace for a very long period of time to be included in peace negotiations, although they were sidelined always. One important thing, when we started this conference 3 days ago, there were discussions about Dayton peace agreement next to us. And we just show curiosity who is going there when no one from like a feminist organization, feminists, women, even from Bosnia who came here for this conference were invited and included. This shows like continuation of sidelining women even after so many years after the war to discuss these issues. So I want to actually raise these issues with two of my dear colleagues, Sara Milenkovska, feminist researcher from Coalition Margins in North Macedonia, but also co-founder of Stella Network, and Snežana Jakovljević, very well-known feminist, for many decades, anti-war activist working for women NGO from Kruševac, Sandglass. You hear our previous speakers. Could you reflect on the situation in Serbia, North Macedonia, but also if you want to reflect wider in the Western Balkans about the questions we raised, especially what women face today and what is the implementation and the status of women, peace and security at the moment? How do you see it? Sara, can you begin with, or?
So we're talking always about when we're, and I actually love the word saying like reimagining, maybe even in a way trying to redefine women, peace and security and what it means for us in our work, but also what it means in the manufactured insecurity that all of us are living. And especially as seeing as a form of feminist and queer intervention, we need to talk more about action, because there is a lot of talk about what certain, documents, conventions, and everything else means. But what is really interesting is to see how that is reflected in our own realities. And I'm saying this especially because when I was trying to even understand how we define, let's say, in North Macedonia, women, peace and security, I recalled the first time that I came across this definition was as a young participant, representative of a civil society invited by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a checkpoint because they needed somebody from the civil society to just be there on the table and stay silent, which I didn't. However, that's the first time that I realized that this is how we portray this in North Macedonia. But then when you go to a bit, a fancy university, and then you see all of this other knowledge that's being produced, especially white feminists coming to conflict areas, researching women, peace and security, you understand a different form of anger when you try to understand even better what all of this means in the actual lived realities of survivors of sexual violence during war, something that somehow we forgot that still exists in this reality while we're living right now, but also we kind of forgot about, and I'm seeing this critically, especially in our region, we kind of forgot even in our own feminist struggle in the Balkans, that there are survivors who are still alive and they're put again on the sideline when we see these celebrations of Dayton, and then also when we understand feminist histories in the region. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to see this whole agenda as something that started as a feminist intervention, that started as something that showed different ways and mechanisms in how we can again, reimagine peace, but also how we can practice peace, something that I see that we're feeling. But how are we trying to do all of these things? How are we trying to use the mechanisms that we have as tools while dealing with the realities of the anti-gender politics? For example, in North Macedonia right now, you have 3 MPs that are directly anti-gender actors who are in the government. You have anti-gender actors who are defining the law on education, completely erasing gender equality as a word, gender identity, sexual orientation, any form of mechanisms that we had for protection, that is being erased, while of course we have a woman president and we celebrated the Women, Peace and Security anniversary with showing women in the military together with UN Women. So my point is that while we have this reality, and as feminists and human rights defenders, we're trying to support survivors, we're trying to support ourselves because we are also have a target on our back just by existing. It's really hard to think, especially because when we even try to introduce the feminist peace and security aspect within the security discussions, the last 4 years, when I tried to convince somebody from the international community, somebody in the embassy, or anybody else that is not part of our organizations, we see a moment where, in the moment when you see that they're actually hearing you, is the moment when you connect gender equality to security. And it's something that, unfortunately, it's a compromise that we all negotiate, we all do all the times. But it's the whole point is that I can see that even in the last 4 years when we said, and it's been going on for much longer, but the anti-gender movement is really more active in the last 4 years in North Macedonia, you see that that's the only framework in which you are listened as a human rights defender, as a feminist. And unfortunately, it's part of the game. That's what we have to do in order for the men to listen to us when we're discussing about changing certain politics and policies. However, I think now, after all that work, after seeing the results of the big regress that is happening on law, not just from from a social cohesion, from a rule of law, but also as a fragile democracy that Macedonia is. Now, finally, this topic is becoming more and more relevant, which I'm actually glad. However, from a different perspective, we kind of forget that now, since the feminist aspect, gender equality is becoming more out there, now we kind of forget that this is actually an intersectional struggle. And I'm saying this especially because we have a lot of issues even in the feminist surroundings in the Balkans and in North Macedonia, when you have women's rights organizations that are transphobic but getting EU funding. So how do we negotiate peace when you have investment into the backsliding of gender equality in one country? So why I'm opening all of these discussions, even though I have a limited time, is to make an intervention within our interventions in how we're trying to reimagine our strategies. And one thing that I am also trying to do through coalition margins, but also as a hopeless idealist, is to think about collective care as a strategy. And I'm so glad that the previous speakers were mentioning the aspect of transnational solidarity. So now we're in the state of how do we practice all of the strategies? How do we practice everything that we've discussed? How do we practice what we've learned from previous generations? How do we practice where we failed also? Because there is something that we need to be for sure that we could have done some things better not to come to this situation where we're discussing basics all over again. So there are ways that we can learn that through sharing the knowledge, through sharing the experiences that we had. And I think comparing how anti-gender actors work in different countries kind of helps us resonate to see, because they're really smart and they have amazing strategies and a lot of resources, $1 billion in the last couple of years invested into 275 organizations that are anti-gender actors in Europe. So the whole point is to see how we can practice by either meeting each other, creating better spaces, creating better safety mechanisms also of our own protection within the collective care practices through mutual aid resources, while also really understanding that this is not a struggle that only the feminist and the queer communities should take on. This is something that needs to be built through a coalition perspective, especially because I was listening to the EU enlargement discussion, and I work and I try to work in EU advocacy for gender equality, but somehow in North Macedonia there is a big gap when we're between the organizations that are working on EU enlargement and organizations that are working for gender equality. So I think this is the moment when we need to build coalitions between sectors, and I am really glad that I'm speaking on a security conference about feminist interventions. But this is also the moment where on a political level it needs to be, I would say, not just from like the solidarity that we need to express and practice, but I'm seeing also from a form that the urgency, especially because I lived the regime of Gruevski, and I'm gonna live another regime that is coming in the next couple of years. that we do not have the privilege not to act right now. There are people living in conflict, living in war, and we do not have also the privilege to, again, strategize. I think now is the moment where we actually need to implement the strategy, because there is so much knowledge produced about this. There is so much information. There is so many ways that we've learned from how we did our best in the past, but now it's the moment where we actually need to do the work. And that's having these discussions, but also taking the next step in how we practice the solidarity, especially, because I will finish up in 1 minute, especially from a perspective that when we see how disinformation, gender disinformation is literally reshaping the reality that we're living. And what I mean by this is not just the politics and the policy and the laws that are changed. What I'm talking about is also the social fabric on one country. The reason why anti-gender movement is so successful in their work is because they capitalized on people feeling insecure. They capitalized on a really region that is always in political instability, but especially in North Macedonia, when you had such a big disappointment from the EU accession process, when you had disappointment from a corrupted system, when you had tragedies every day. It's so easy when you have an anti-gender actor that comes to your village because they're really good in field work. They come and they say to you, you know what, the reason why all of this is happening is the most marginalized group in the world, trans people. And the reasoning, because of how they're trying to present this narrative through moral panic, through fear, is because we are also a product of a system that wasn't functional before. When you destroy education on every level, then you cannot expect any form of protection or even critical thinking, and especially in culture plays a really important role in also all of this, but also when you criminalize solidarity, we cannot be surprised that what we're seeing right now becomes a form of reality. So sorry for being so depressing, but I think the urgency and what we need to do in the next following years, it's going to be a marathon for all of us, and for that we do not have to compromise.
Thank you very much, Sara, for sharing your thoughts and calling for us to act and strengthen our networks and coalitions. I will ask police, Snežana, but to share your experiences, and like you have generational and decades of work at the grassroots level, knowing region very well, but knowing your local community. Can you share with us like Serbia's perspective and your perspective on what we actually heard before?
Of course, I will. Thank you, Maja. Thank you for organizing this panel. I think it's really important. Because, by the way, I didn't notice during the previous 2 days that there was a huge number of panelists who mentioned the issue of women, peace, security while they were talking about democracy and about other important things. But I think of course, it's not possible to talk about democracy if we don't talk about women, peace, security, if we don't talk about gender equality, if we don't talk about human rights and women's rights. Thank you for inviting wonderful guests from around the world. So it's really important to hear them and to get some information which is not known for us, at least for me. I'm living in Kruševac, as you said. It's a town in southeastern Serbia, and I'm emphasizing that because I would like just to sign the place when I'm talking about not only physically, but maybe in somehow the way how I will discuss about the issue of women, peace, security. I will back to 1999, in time when there was a war between Kosovo and Serbia. And in Kruševac, there was a big protest against mobilization of men for a war in Kosovo. And that was and the protest was led mostly by women, mothers, wives, sisters, daughters of mobilized men. And I remember after that, when protest finished, I remember that there was not small number of people who tried to diminish actually the importance of that protest, saying that women just wanted their men back home. They didn't have any political demands. They don't want the resignation of the government. They didn't want to any political changes. But as a feminist, we know that personal is the political. And at the moment when women went to the street and loudly said their demands, and that moment, protests got a political dimension and became political, actually, or civil, whatever. And after that, just as in Kruševac, also in other parts of Yugoslavia during the war in the 90s, women feminists and activists were the first among the first who raised their voice against war, militarism, nationalism. And then 2000 come and appeared, actually United Nations adopted Women, Peace, Security Conference, and it was welcome in the area of Western Balkan. And I also remember 2009 when we got the first Serbia got the first national action plan for implementation of Resolution 1325, and know how the women within the network of Women in Black eager to make the indicators, to define the indicators for implementation of national action plan. And there was more than 40 indicators listed for implementation, but none of them, or very small number, accepted by the government. And we saw actually that the government doesn't want to leave the issue of women, peace, security from their hands. They wanted to own it. What we have now in Serbia is militarization of women, peace, security agenda instead of democratization of militarism. We, in meantime, got third national action plan for Resolution 1325, but we don't actually have women, peace, security agenda in our political and social life. What happened now in Serbia is actually that state, through the police and media and all other who are loyal to the government, actually are the main violator, are the main abuser of women in the street, women who are not only in the street, but also women who are forced to support them in the meetings that they organize, women who are working as teachers and professors. They are fired, they are removed from a higher position to lower position. They stood without salaries for the months. So that's really something that we, women, peace, security, I think it's important more than ever at the moment, not only in Serbia, but also in all other, as Sara talked, in all other Western Balkan countries. For example, in Bosnia, there was an attempt to bring a law which will, all those organizations who receive foreign donations to declare them as foreign agents. So that's really, I think it's time to talk more than ever about the issue.
Thank you very much, Snežana, for highlighting that continuity in the fight against war militarism, especially contribution of women, not only from Serbia, but other places in the region. And this huge onslaught on women brings me to my two other speakers. Milena Stošić, who is senior international consultant. She worked extensively for so many years, also within the OSCE mission in Serbia, on youth, peace and security. And Marigona Shabiu from Kosovo. She's executive director of Youth Initiative for Human Rights. I want to hear your intervention, especially from that perspective of the youth, at youth, peace and security, because what we are seeing at the global level is that Generation Z is leading political change in many countries. That's the one thing. The other thing, what we are seeing here in Serbia, that students are actually actively opposing this repression and trying to actually change the society in a way. But among them, women students were heavily attacked in the last year. And we have so many examples that younger generation of women and men through the organization work a lot in reconciliation. That was the work, Youth Initiative, Human Rights, but also reminding society of the war and crimes, but trying to bridge the gaps between divided communities. So you did a lot on this issue. So I want to hear your interventions and your perspective on the general topic. Milena, can you start?
Thank you very much, Maja. Thanks to previous speakers for their contributions. Yes, Youth Peace and Security agenda is far more recent than WPS. It's just 10 years old. It's an anniversary also this year, this December. And usually when we discuss youth peace and security, which has pretty much the same logical foundation as WPS, we always tend to refer to, oh, let's take a look at the lessons learned from the women peace and security. You know, it's like treated as a little sister. So we can also learn from the mistakes and gaps and whatnot. Today I will try to maybe reverse this somehow and to see what can we learn from younger generation that might be useful for implementation of, well, maybe any other policy as well, but today we're talking about these two. And in that sense, I would like to refer first to this question of the global anti-gender backlash and also what we are seeing here and in the region. It made me wonder, well, is this actually just the, amplification of the systems that were never really fully on board when it comes to gender equality? I mean, all of you probably read some analysis on how VPS implementation looks like, and you don't even have to read it. Whenever you live, you can feel also, if you're interested in the area, how that looks like or not. The most extreme example, for example, being, and I also put this to the table as for solidarity, in South Africa. In 2 days, they're going to have women's shutdown because every 2.5 hours one woman dies. They have WPS for the last 5 years. They have national action plan, but only in 1 year they had rise of femicide more than 30%. So let's take that example, not even to go to Serbia. That is also, I think Snežana covered a lot how this looks like, and also some other aspects of gender inequality and unwillingness to that end. But then there is the question, especially in spaces where you have captured state, or as our friend Zorana Antonijević would say, deconstructed state, can you even do something in relation to public policy? Or where is the area where you as a feminist or as women organization, or okay, also as multilateral organization who operates here, as bilateral donor, what can you actually do? Unfortunately, what we are also seeing is that, in front of the parliament here, we had for 2 weeks a woman whose son died in Novi Sad on hunger strike, and at the same time you have, not to name it, but bilateral donor who comes to the parliament to do a capacity building with parliamentarians on WPS as if nothing happens. business as usual. So that's the paradox where I think the feminist movement, women's organizations also are asking themselves, should we even cooperate? And those who cooperate, I think they do it also for the sake of women to whom they offer direct services, because this is urgent and you simply cannot ignore it. And when it comes to young women, they are very usually subsumed under this word youth or women, and then we simply do not see them in these processes. Although when we say these terms, we think policy processes, we think documents, we think norming. I think for many of us who were involved in policy making in such ways, we are also very much detached from reality, from actual people, from human security on the ground. And I think this situation in Serbia and what students are doing here, young women included, are inviting us to look back there. Although this might sound, a little bit like romanticizing things, I believe all of us from here, we were super, super surprised with what happened. What happened in just a few months in terms of emotions, emotional catharsis, repoliticizing certain things, understanding, that personal is political really in everyday life. And I was thinking, oh my God, all of these youth programs and grants and whatnot did not do as much as these students for just a few months. But of course, there is certain legacy on which they made continuation. However, this made me wonder, what can we learn from the ground? And I think one thing has to do, of course, with direct democracy, which I think it's a good reminder when you make also policies, be it WPS or any other, that we are skipping a lot of groups of people. Even within feminist movement or women's organizations, these tend to be, unfortunately, also closed circles, because, let's admit it, it's not really easy to go and build those coalitions, to open those doors, to sometimes it seems, oh my God, I have to explain these basic things all over again and keep my posture, and my calmness. And I think this is a big, let's say, if I have to put a title on this problem, it would be called My Sister, Servant of Patriarchy, because there are many, let's say, sisters or citizens and other groups with whom we simply do not cooperate, and this is necessary for change. On the other side, we see that this students' movement, maybe not so many people would call themselves feminists, or say we are for feminist values and whatnot, but we do see practices which are inherently feminist practices. Not to say all of them are super constructive or maybe good nowadays, but we do see the heritage even in the hunger strike, which actually in modern history started with suffragettes. Then we see civil disobedience, symbolic performative acts, you name it. The collective care as political act that was already mentioned, I think this is a big thing that the student movement brought to the table. So there is this feminist vibe, let's say, going on, although we are still very much, there is a red line to say I'm a feminist or feminism. There is the distance towards it. If you want to go outside of these circles when we talk about this, like business as usual. I'm very active in the citizen plenum in my own municipality, so trust me, I had these discussions. And that's why I say we need to put who is going to build those bridges? Who is going to work on this? And I think that when we speak about policy making, we need to maybe invest more in this bottom up all over again, no matter how much exhausting that might be. But since we do not have functional institutions, what else is there to be done? And on another side, I think that young feminists and peace builders, they have been doing a lot. It's not always very visible. Even young students are not necessarily always visible in a leaderless movement. However, we have a research that came out a couple of days ago by feminist collective FemPlatz. They interviewed 170 women, including young women. They also mapped at least minimum 48 different violent incidents that happened to 71 women in the country. Among them, of course, students in the first row. And what we are noticing here is that young women are in the first rows of the struggle. They do take part in all kinds of roles within the movement, in working groups, in decision-making, but they also suffer a lot of gender-based violence, which is not necessarily always recognized as gender-based, even from the sides that you think are the allies. They should understand, and all of that. So I think that let's not defocus, with this gender aspect, because there is a bigger issue going on, not understanding that authoritarian regime and patriarchy, they feed on each other, or that we cannot speak and expect any kind of democratic change without speaking about gender equality and gender-based violence and everything that we're testifying these days. So what to say? I totally agree with especially what Sara was saying before. I think this coalition building from the ground, from the scratch, I think this matters a lot. It's exhausting but necessary, and I think that young feminists are already trying to do this a lot. Flexible funding, yay, that would be amazing. I think that in every kind of panel we speak about feminism, this is always the message. But I think that this coalition building transnationally also should lead to this kind of messaging, because donors need organizations as much as organizations need donors. And this kind of conversation is sort of missing because of course, survival needs. So not to take further time, I just believe that we need to go back to basics in terms of democratic innovations and thinking, how do we create policies that are actually inclusive, not purely consultative, and what do you do when you do not have institutions? I'm not against institutionalization, just let's take it as it is. We have no counterparts here in that sense. Then I think it's up to feminist movements, it's up to peace builder movements, civil society to also open up towards others and invest in this coalition building, allyship, and dismantling, basic things that we thought are being done and understood.
Thank you very much, Milena, for shedding the light on the situation in Serbia, but also giving us a little bit of hope, even that in authoritarian context you can practice feminism and expand. Marigona, please, could you share with us your thoughts about?
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here. I know it's really late and you are pretty tired, I can tell from your faces, so I will try to be brief. And already a lot has been said, and very important perspectives globally, locally from the region as well. And of course I can concur to that, and also trying to bring a little bit of experience and perspective from Kosovo as well. And I think what Snežana said earlier about this kind of like men politicians trying to minimize and trying to limit the agency of women when they go out and claim their space to be political and to ask for political changes. This is also what happens to young people generally. So it's kind of like this boxing of women's activism, of youth activism into being something that is not really, like political and seeking change, but it's actually something that it's done for, for very mediocre and very personal reasons. So I think this is kind of like the narrative and the discourse that we as activists across the region, globally as well, that we need to kind of like counteract and attack, and to say that yes, we are young, we are women, we have these different identities, but we are also political beings, and we are here to claim our space and claim our voices, and to by using these voices, our voices, to try to make a change in our communities, in our classrooms, in our universities, and in our societies, and in the further societal structure. So I think this is very important, and this brings me to my next point, which I think is very important, and maybe it hasn't been highlighted as much in this panel. It's this intergenerational dialogue that that we need to highlight, and we need to put much more focus on, because I mean we learn a lot from activists from other generations, from not just from different contexts, geographic contexts, but also age-wise. We need, as young people, we need to kind of like get these lessons from activists from different generations, and try to build these bridges and try to learn from them, not just from their mistakes, but also to learn the good practices, and to see how we can amplify this dialogue and use this kind of like this intergenerational dialogue to bring change, and to use that in the positive aspect in all of our societies. So it's very important to kind of like focus on this. This has been very active in Kosovo, especially among the feminist movement, among the queer movement in Kosovo, and we see a lot of benefits by us coming together, activists of different ages, and trying to work together and push forward our agendas for peace, for equality, for justice. Another point that of course I wanted to highlight is this cross-border solidarity. I think it was mentioned a lot, and of course I want to reiterate that, because I think now that we are living in this very insecure political momentum, not just in the region, but globally as well, with very well elaborated anti-gender rhetoric, discourse, movement by Sara that is coming to the region. I think now more than ever we need to come together and stand together and resist. I think the word of the day of this era is resistance and hope. We need to strengthen our resistance, because we are getting attacked by all sides, all actors, and we don't have many allies, sadly. And the only allies that we have is I mean, people like you in this room, people in our small bubbles that we can count on and rely on when the situation is going to get worse, because we see that, I mean, this negative trend is further expanding and further perpetuating. So to not be very pessimistic, but to kind of like turn this negative trend into strength and resistance, and hope that by standing together, by working on the very grassroots level, supporting local activists, movements such as Snežana's, and small organizations, small initiatives, very informal ones in our local communities, I think this is going to strengthen the resistance and build more resilience within our communities, so we stand against these anti-gender, anti-rights actors, authoritarian leaders that are kind of like spreading very rapidly everywhere. I mean, to not lose hope, because I feel like that's kind of like this, and this is, of course, this is the main thing that anti-gender, anti-rights movements, authoritarian leaders are trying to do to us, to make us lose hope and to make us give up that all the progress that we have achieved, especially when it comes to, like gender equality, all the documents which are now being co-opted actually and weaponized by political leaders globally, for us to not give up, to resist, and to try to preserve what the progress that we have achieved so far as much as possible, even though it's difficult. But I think going back to my point, this intergenerational dialogue and cross-border solidarity, especially among activists, it's I hope it's gonna make us survive. So yeah, I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing this issue. Thank you all for being patient and listening us with interest. Now it's time for you. If you have a comment to share, if you want to share any of your personal views on the topic, or use the opportunity to ask our panelists here in the room, but also who are patiently listening us online as well. Does anyone have a comment, question for our panelists? Please introduce yourself and...
Sorry. I'm Jakov. I am a student of psychology, and I'm also a human rights activist and women rights activist. So I'm very happy that I was able to come to this this panel discussion. And well, as I listened to all the panelists, I was wondering about a few things. You mentioned that patriarchy and authoritarian regimes go hand in hand. However, there is another issue that we do not mention, and it is that unfortunately the anti-gender movements usually use religion as their feeding ground too, and we need to be able to address that too. Maybe through working with religious leaders so they will embrace the actual women's rights, or some other ways to handle that. But we cannot just pretend it doesn't happen, because the majority of the arguments in the European Parliament against My Voice, My Choice initiative, they were based not on rationale, but on religion. So we need to address that. We need to fight back. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is about including men and addressing men in the women's rights, because what I see is usually women's rights organizations, they focus on women, which is great, but we need also to educate men not to be misogynistic, because if we don't, then they will go and listen to crazy influencers and extremist red pill ideas and all of that. And the third thing is about those companies, extremely rich companies that support anti-gender movements. Perhaps the feminist organizations could make a list of those companies so that we can boycott them, just like we boycott the companies that support the regime in Israel and all of that, because we saw that it is an effective way to combat something that's bad for us. So maybe that is something that you can also talk with your colleagues in the world and to have that list so that we can fight back, because those companies, they do not have their own money, they have the money because we give it to them. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for very good points. Ellie, please.
Hello, my name is Ebis Pahiu, and I'm from the Dutch Embassy in Tirana in Albania, but also an activist on women's rights and queer rights in Albania. And from my observations, and also from a previous panel earlier today, looking at extremist organizations and extremist narratives at the moment, we're seeing that the anti-gender movement, yes, is very prevalent, is very much spread in different countries, and in some countries is more advanced than others. But we're also seeing lack of attention from the security community of the anti-gender movement as a security concern. We're still talking about the anti-gender movement, anti-queer movement as an anti-rights. So challenging the human rights structure, challenging the human rights architecture. But we're not looking at the anti-gender movement as actually a challenge to national securities of our countries and to democracy itself. And I was wondering if you have a comment on this, and how can we advance this particular narrative in order to raise the attention and to raise the bars also from our politicians, also from legislators, administrators and executors of security in our countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Alma and Sara.
Okay. Hi, I'm Alma from Italy. I'm a gender activist. I'm also part of the diaspora here in the Balkans. Mine is just probably a reflection, because I remember when I was working years ago on the National Action Plan in Italy, I was pushing to include femicide, because just for the rationale that if we're not alive, it's kind of difficult to push. And I also, because as was mentioned, I do think that it's a war on us. So it's part of a conflict, because if they kill us, then it's definitely a conflict. And now connecting also the dots from the previous panel and looking at how our lives are advancing with technology, I was wondering what would be your take on including cybersecurity into the National Action Plan from a feminist perspective, of course. Quoting very briefly that recently in Italy there was a scandal in which there was an app using AI-generated images that was basically removing clothes from publicly available images of women, and this regarded young parliamentarians, activists, influencers, anybody who had a public profile. It didn't have to be feminists. Of course, feminists were the earliest to be targeted, but it's just taking a picture that maybe you gave consent for an interview, or it's your profile picture. So you did give consent, but you didn't give consent to remove clothes, and of course, with all that came. So I think we do need to bring a lot of feminist theory and approaches to cybersecurity, and if that can fall into the national action plans or not, maybe it's another place. Thank you.
Sara?
Hello, I am Sara Terbec. I'm from Faculty of Political Sciences. My question is about something that has already been mentioned. It's the role of the church in shaping politics and the conversation about gender. 2 to 3 years ago, we had a law that was being passed in the Serbian parliament about gender-sensitive language. And we saw the way that issue was securitized by the head of the Orthodox Church speaking out about it in a conversation, and in that conversation he used very demeaning language about women he spoke about. And after the tape of that conversation was seen in public, that was the moment we saw the general public took interest in the conversation about gender-sensitive language and the law that was being pushed in the parliament, and taking a stance against it on the basis of the words from the head of the church. And we do see in other countries in the region, and we do see in other countries in the world, the church being a factor of pushing women back and pushing women's rights back. And when we do try to make change and put laws that will actually make us equal, our position in society would be better. We are pushed back by the church. And I was wondering, have you seen a way to properly push back against them? Because in our society, in Serbia, it is quite hard to push against that narrative. And I do think in many societies it still is. Even, let's say, in the more Western countries like the United States, I do think the evangelical church there has a very big say in what goes on in politics. And it's quite important what they say. So is there a way to actually push against that narrative that the church pushes against women's rights?
Thank you very much, but for the sake of this discussion, because we have to wrap up and close this panel, unfortunately we were delayed because of technical issues. I will give first opportunity to our speakers online, Nicola, Shirine, and Olena, to respond to any comments or questions they find comfortable regarding either religious, what was two times brought up, or suggestions on how to boycott, maybe enlist the companies or include men, and how to actually reshape the narrative from anti-right to actually anti-democratic and anti-security perspective. Who would like to first? Nicola?
Thank you. I will only respond to some, not all, because also of time.
Only you find, yeah.
Okay, in terms of cybersecurity, there are indeed action plans that address cybersecurity and AI. Like, for example, the Irish action plan is quite prominent on that, in including cybersecurity in its national action plan on women, peace, security. Then I wanted to say something about the very interesting comment from the representative of the Dutch embassy in Albania on how an attack and backlash towards gender equality is a security concern. And I've heard like 2 weeks ago, I was in Brussels, and there was an Iraqi women's rights organization speaking about how the underfunding or the funding cuts of women's organization in the country leave space for more radicalization, and it creates a vacuum of, let's say, democratic structures and human rights foundations in that case. But and that is becoming, and she argued in line of exactly that argumentation, as well as we have done a study on the resilient potential of women organization under authoritarian regime in Latin America and the Caribbean, where also going back to the church plays a very strong role in that gender backlash, but also in which we linked the shrinking spaces of women organization to the deterioration of democratic structures. So under these lines, I think it could be a very interesting turnaround of the agenda. My last point in terms of including men, yes, absolutely. I think to a large extent, maybe we have failed to sufficiently do that, in the past. So I'm a big favor of that. And if there is a global boycott towards women, peace, security, and more solidarity, count me in.
Thank you, Nicola. Shirine?
Yes, thank you. I would like to comment on the inclusion of men. Definitely, this is a plus to the agenda. However, there is one issue that, like we were discussing this, it's about the occupation of a space. So, what kind of space are men in this women, peace, and security agenda? We want them as allies in terms of how they share our demands, how they understand our demands, how they understand our priorities. But what about how we reimagine or reinvent the space, and especially the decision making within the women, peace, and security agenda? This is a question that we need to tackle. As for the cybersecurity, definitely this is a must, and we have been tackling also the issue of violence against women in politics and other things. Maybe I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Olena?
Yes, thank you. I just thinking now about the concern of last speaker about how we could create the collaboration with church leaders or something like this, because really the church only accepts feminism to the extent that it finds acceptable. And I think that it could be really very hard conversation, how we could provide this dialogue and what will be the framework for this dialogue. And the second point, and maybe the last one, which touched me a lot during this discussion, is how we could organize that intergenerational dialogue. One very famous Ukrainian human rights activist and Nobel Peace Prize winner, Alexandra Matviichuk, once told that maybe one of the roots of the crisis, of the democracy crisis in Europe now, is that this new generation, the generation of youth, is like a human rights customer. They never fought for human rights, and they received as like a gift, of heaven. So we really have to find the way how we could support this democratical culture with this fighting for our values. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Snežana, your thoughts on what has
Yeah,
been...
there are three words actually come to my mind when we talk about that. The first is mentioned solidarity, then cooperation and education as well. We need education. We need education. We need educate men and women as well to know what the causes and consequences of some decisions, streams, tendencies, events, and also to educate us for activism, how to be active, what to do. That's really important, because it's sometimes it's very hard to talk with somebody who doesn't think in you. I was many times in the situation that I don't know to say what to say in some ordinary, I don't know, a sentence which is different from my opinion. So that's really, we need something we need education for that as well. All of us, I think.
Sara?
This is how we improve our work, by feedback and building on what we're saying. Yeah, we forgot God in the room. So North Macedonia is a really amazing example of how all the different religions came together for the first time in history. So not when we had a conflict or a COVID or poverty, which 40% of our people live, but against the law on gender equality. So 5 representatives from different religions came together. And what we're trying to do regarding how we're dealing with the church, I have to mention, especially because our former executive director of Coalition Margins, she was harassed for years. So trying to go against the church in North Macedonia, and I guess in Serbia even more, I think it's a fight for that. It's super, super, extremely unsafe. And we're a bit alone in that struggle, because we even had to beg, especially amazing investigative journalists, but they weren't encouraged by other people. We begged for them to even do at least some story to show how anti-gender movement is actually funded through the churches. Because they don't pay taxes, they're not, you know, even when we tried to sue for hate crime, one of their sveštenik, he was like, the police didn't even want to intervene to give him, you know, the fact that he's being sued. So they are protected by the state, and we should not neglect how much influence that they have. However, I have to mention something else. I live in Skopje, which is, you know, the capital of North Macedonia, but feminist activists that are not living in urban area, that are not living in the main cities, if they fight against the church in their communities, they're literally excluded from their communities. So while we're fighting some of these things, we need to think about our own security. And this goes again in line with having men in our organizations, and like, they're more than welcome, but we also need men to step up and show that they're actually doing the work. And this is how coalition building should be done. I cannot build a coalition with somebody that doesn't have this, not always the same values, but you know what I mean. We need to have at least some intentionality for that. What I do when it comes to the narrative, that's my go-to. I always talk about anti-democratic because anti-gender, what it does it mean for somebody, you know. But I always adjust according to the target audience. Here I know I can say more directly, but in different spaces, this is my best strategy that worked for me, at least in my attempts of feminist intervention, is to point that this is anti-democratic because of the disinformation, because where the money are coming from, and because of how the church is involved. So this is kind of showing, and that's why I also mentioned, how can we talk about the enlargement process where we have a corrosion of any form of institution because of anti-gender politics? But transnational and intergenerational solidarity, this is how we win, this is how we support each other, so thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you very much. Milena and Marigona.
Yeah, all of these angles are so valid, and I could speak long about those, but in the interest of time, I think the key word is always courage. you know, as a starting point from whatever your positionality is, I think courage is crucial ingredient to even start having conversation about anything, to put your voice out there, to also be ready to maybe take in some of the consequences on a personal level. And also I think we can learn from the animals world as well, because you know how some animals, they do gather together and protect each other in different shape and form. And I think this is a good visual metaphor also for these coalitions, which should be diverse and in essence really reflect the societies, the real life that we are living with diverse people surrounding us.
You have the pleasure to actually.
Wow. Okay.
So.
Yes, I think some self-criticism as well to our movements in our countries, but also on the regional level. So I think we also need to be less exclusive and less elitist, because I think that this is also something that we see, and it's kind of like a trend within the activist groups in Kosovo as well, but also I see this kind of like this sort of mentality in other countries as well. So we need to open up. We need to bring in more people, and this brings me to your point of like also including men and not alienating men. So trying to be more empathic of the structures that we've been raised to, and kind of like understanding, and from that understanding to try to change the mentality of men and young boys as well, and to bring them on board, hopefully as supportive feminists. So also going more into the field, not very having our meetings and our conversations in exclusive places, but really going onto the grassroots level, something that religious groups are very successful in doing. So I think we need to be more of that, and really to go into the community and to try to spread our values that we are fighting for, and to counteract the narratives that they are promoting. But I think, yeah, it's very important for us, for our movements, for our groups to open up and be less exclusive and less elitist. So maybe I will end with that.
Thank you very much all for participating, sharing your valuable contributions and questions. I will close and wrap up this session, but I invite those who are present for a closing ceremony outside the room. Nicola, Shirine, Olena, thank you very much. It was lovely meeting you online. I hope in the future I will have time to meet you in person, or maybe host you and bring you back to the Belgrade or elsewhere. Pleasure, and have a nice day. Ciao.